going to be learning today is we are going to be using a new strategy so we can add numbers nice and easily. So what we're doing is we're going to be using the strategy tidy numbers. So what we're going to be doing is changing one number for our problem into a tidy number so we can make an addition problem easier to solve. And before we start, we need to talk about what tidy numbers are. So if anybody knows what a tidy number is, that is fantastic. So a tidy number is a number, that ends in 0. Okay, so examples 10, 20, 50, 700, whatever. So basically, it's that it ends in a 0. Okay, so I'm going to first show you a problem, and we're going to start really easy. Okay, because I think the best way to teach a new strategy is if you do it with an easy number so that you know that it's true. Okay, so say we have 6 plus 8. Okay, so we've got 6 plus 8, and to make it easier for you to trust that the strategy works, we can draw underneath 6 and 8. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. So what a tidy number strategy is you change one number to a tidy number, one that ends in 0, and to do that, what you need to do is we have in total, we've got 6 and 8, so we can imagine that these are counters, right? 6 counters over here and 8 counters over here. What we can do is borrow from our 6 counters and give them to make a tidy number here for our 8, and that way we're still having the same number of counters in total. We're just moving them around to make it easier to solve. So the first step is we need to choose a number that's closest to our tidy number, and out of 6 and 8, 8 is much closer, and we need to think to ourselves, how many do we need to add to get to a tidy number? 8, our tidy number would be 10. How many do we have to add? 2. So if we are borrowing, if we're adding 2 over here, that means we have to take away 2 on this side, because what we're doing is we're taking these 2 counters and we're moving them across here so that we now have 8 plus 2, 10 counters, and we now have 6 take away 2, and you can see it here, 4 counters. Now, the thing about tidy numbers, if you take away from one side and add to the other, if you add from one side and take to the away from the other, you still have the same amount of counters. So 6 plus 8 is the same as 4 plus 10. All we did is gave 2 from our 6 and put it for our 8. But 4 plus 10 is much easier to solve. What's 4 plus 10? 14. And just in case you didn't trust the strategy, you can always check. If you don't know what 6 plus 8 is, it is 14. We can check by adding our 6 counters, and then 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. So they're both equal 14, but what we've done is we've changed one number, this number over here, to a tidy number. Okay, and to do that, we add or subtract on one side, and we have to do the opposite to the other side. Okay, so let's have a go at another problem. So I did a nice and easy one just so you can understand the strategy works. I'm going to do another couple of easy ones, and I will leave a little description down below for you to skip forward if you find these easy ones too easy. Okay, but for now, I'm going to keep doing easy-ish ones. So what about 7 plus 5? And again, to help you out, if you're someone that struggles a little bit with understanding that we borrow from one side and give to the other, I suggest that you draw as well your counters. But we are practicing to not count on. So when we say count on, that's when you would go 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and then you find out your answer because you add 5 one by one. So, oops, and I can see that I've accidentally got ahead of myself and I have made 6. So, here is our first problem. 7 plus 5. Okay, our first step is we need to figure out, we need to find the number that's closest to a tidy number. So out of 7 and 5, remembering tidy numbers end in 0, which one is closest to a tidy number? It would be 7. Okay, it would be 7. Now, what we need to do is we need to change the 7 to make it easier to solve. So we need to add a certain number so we can make a tidy number. And to do that, what we're going to do is we're going to add to the side by borrowing from the other side. So how many do we have to add to make 7 a tidy number? We have to add 3. So if we add 3, what we're doing is we're borrowing 3 from the other side. Okay, so we're taking these 3 over here and we're moving them over here so we can have our tidy number. Okay? Okay, and I'm trying to use the same sort of language that we've used before with place value. It's really important that we understand that what we're doing is we're borrowing. Okay, we're borrowing from our second number. Okay, so 7 plus 3 makes 10, and 5 take away 3 makes 2. Now, 7 plus 5 or 10 plus 2? Which one's easier to solve to you? 10 plus 2, because that way you've got your tens number, your tidy number, and you're just adding in 2. That's so much easier to solve. Okay, and in case you don't believe that it's true, we can count up our original blacks from our 7 plus 5. We've got 7, and then 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So what we've done is we've made one number a tidy number by borrowing from our second number. So we think, how many to make a tidy number? 7 plus 3 is 10. So in order to add 3 on this side, we had to take away 3 on this side, because that way we still have our same amount of counters, we've just moved them around to make it easier to solve. Okay, so we're going to do another one. We'll do one that's slightly harder, and then we will move on to some quite challenging ones. Okay, I will leave you with some different follow-up activities if these easy ones are enough of a challenge for you. Okay, so now we're going to do slightly harder. I've got 13 and I've got 8. And if you want, again, if you still feel like you need to draw them underneath, you totally can. I'm just going to make my brush strokes bigger so I don't have to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay, so our original problem is 13 plus 8. If we look back to our first step is to find the number that's closest to a tidy number. So now I've made it a little bit harder for you. We've got 13 and we have 8. 13, the closest tidy number for 13 is 10. The closest tidy number for 8 would also be 10. So which one is closest to a tidy number? Which one is going to be easier to make a tidy number? It's going to be 8, right? And how do we make 8 a tidy number? We have to add. And how many do we have to add? 8 plus what makes 10? 2. So in order to have this tidy number, what we need to do, if we're adding 2 to this pile over here, that means we have to take away from this pile over here. So take away 2, and I'm going to show you what I mean by that. Okay, so I'm taking these 2 over here, and I'm going to move them. And if you have counters at home, if you happen to have counters, that would be amazing, and that would make this a lot easier for you to do. But you can just draw it as well and understand that these are like counters. So now I've got my 2 more. Okay, so here's my 2 more. Now, my new problem is 8 plus 2, which is 10. 13 take away 2, 13 take away 2 is 11. Now, what's easier to solve, 13 plus 8 or 11 plus 10? Because we're adding a tidy number, all we have to do is add our 10s and 1s. So if we look at our 11, we're going 10 plus 10, which is 20. And I got my 10 because I've got 10 over here. And then I've got a 1. So 10 plus 10 is 20, plus 1 is 21. Now that's so much easier to solve compared to 13 plus 8. Okay, so I'm going to do another problem with you, another one that's this kind of level, and then we can try some harder ones. Hopefully you can see that using tidy numbers is a different strategy that you could use that's better than counting on, because you're still adding the same amount, you are just making it easier to solve by moving from one pile to the other. Okay, so let's do another one, and I'll still do numbers like that. Okay, so I've got 16 plus 7. And again, if you want to draw out what it looks like, you're welcome to do that. Now I've got more numbers, it might be a little bit harder, but you can draw out 16, or you can just imagine you've got one big pile and you've got one smaller pile. Okay, so 16 plus 7. My first step, and I can look back to my instructions over here, my first step is to find the number that's closest to a tidy number, 16 or 7. So 16, the closest number would be 20. 7, the closest number would be 10. Which number is closest to a tidy number? That would be 7, okay? Because we have to add less to get to our tidy number of 10. So the next step is we need to make this 7 a tidy number by borrowing from our second number. So to do that, we figure out firstly, do we have to add or subtract? We have to add. How many do we have to add to the 7 to make 10? 7 plus 3 makes 10. So if we're adding 3 on this side, we are taking away on this side. Okay, so you always do the opposite. So 7 plus 3, take away 3. Okay, so you can imagine we're taking a portion and we're adding it over here. Okay, and if you did, you could have drawn all of the numbers out, but I didn't want to do that this time. So 7 plus 3, that makes 10. And 16 take away 3, that gives us 13. Now, which number is easier to solve? 16 plus 7 or 13 plus 10? 13 plus 10 is much easier to solve because you just need to add your 10s and then your 1s. So that's 10 plus 10 equals 20. And then we just need to add our plus 3. 20 plus 3 gives us 23. And we can check that it's right because we can just, sorry, I know I keep getting messages, check by going whatever method you normally do. So 16 plus 7, maybe you have to count on 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23. So it does work. We can make a problem easier to solve by borrowing from one side and giving it to the other and making a tidy number. Hopefully you can see that by adding things like 10s and 20s is so much easier than adding these kinds of problems over here. Okay, we'll do one more, and then I might leave you guys with a challenge. Okay, so another problem here. I'm going to do bigger numbers again. I'm going to challenge you now with an even harder one. So now you probably can't draw your counters, but you could just draw big piles. Okay, so we've got a 36 and a slightly much smaller pile, 18. Okay, so the first step is we have to figure out which number is closest to a tidy number, and if you have to, you can write it on the side. So 36 is probably closest to 40. I'll rub that out and make that a dot so it doesn't look like I'm saying subtract. Is closest to 40. 18 is closest to what tidy number? 20. Which number is closest? It's our 18 and 20. Okay, so now we need to make this 18, a tidy number. So how do we make it a tidy number? We need to add, which means we're borrowing from this pile over here. How many do we have to add to make 18, 20? We add 2. So if we're adding 2 on this side, that means we're taking away from this other side because we're borrowing part of this over here and we're taking it here to make it easier to solve. So we add 2 on one side and we do the opposite to the other side. Okay, so 18 plus 2, that's 20. 36, take away 2, that's 34. Now, tell me that 34 plus 20, that is so much easier than 36 plus 18. Okay, because all we have to do is add our 10s and 1s. So our first step is we add our 10s. 30 plus 20 equals 50. And we know that because we know 3 plus 2 is 5. So 30 plus 20 gives us 50. And then we have to add in our 4. And that equals 54. Did that make sense? Hopefully you were drawing along as you went. Okay, so now I think we'll do one more. I know I said I'd do one more last time, but I've changed my mind. I'm going to do one more again because I'm going to show you again on the side of how to make sure you know which number is closest to a tidy number. And I'm going to make it a little bit different. So I've got 43, and 56. Okay? Now, we need to think about what number is closest to a tidy number. 43, what tidy number is closest to 43? It would be 40. And if we look at 56, if we think about rounding, what tidy number is closest to 56? It would be 60. Okay, so which number is closest to its tidy number? It's 43. So you can see now this time, and I'll draw my piles, sorry I forgot, 43, 56. Now, you can see that I don't always have to add to make a tidy number. This one here, 43, to get my tidy number of 40, I'm going to have to take away. So I'm going to take away 3. So if I'm taking away 3 on this side, what do I have to do on this side? The opposite, which is we have to add 3. So I'm imagining I'm taking 3 and I'm giving it over here. So 43 take away 3 gives us our tidy number of 40. Now 56 plus 3, that gives us 56, 59. Now all we have to do is add our tens and ones, our place value. So what's 40 plus 50? 40 plus 50 is 90. And then 90 plus our 9 gives us 99. Okay, that is our answer. Okay, so how did you find this strategy? Was it easy or was it hard? I'm going to give 2 different follow-up or practice activities for you to do, and you can choose, depending on your level, what you'd like to do. If you'd like to make easy numbers, so easy numbers are more like problems like this, or if you want a challenge, you can do like okay, so this is easy. This is a challenge. Okay, it's up to you. I'm going to leave 2 different follow-up activities for you to have a go at, and we will do our lesson in the afternoon. So if you don't really understand this strategy, please don't worry, because I'm going to teach you the strategy again this afternoon. Okay, so hopefully you learned something new. Hopefully you know what a tidy number is. It's a number that ends in a 0, and hopefully you know that you can make a problem easier to solve by borrowing from one side and taking away from the other. Okay, so same with over here. I can borrow from one side, take away from the other. And that makes our problems easier to solve. 40 plus 3 is so much easier than 37 plus 6. 11 plus 10 is easier than 12 plus 9. Okay, well done.